tonight, one man is dead following a freak accident at the Castries Wharf.
Or he hit something, you know, because of the turn. So he ran very close to the turn. And that's why he couldn't knock in.
The government touts real growth in the economy and says those who are not feeling its effects will eventually. And the Castries South MP welcomes the introduction of a parole system, but says it must be accompanied by a complete overhaul of the prison system. We have the details of these stories and more coming up.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News with Lovelace and Amy Joseph.
Good evening. It is Wednesday, the 10th of April 2019. Welcome to the Hot 7 Nightly News. We're on Flow Channel 117, Kiss FM 105.5 and 105.9, www.caribbeanhottv.com, and of course on our free Caribbean Hot FM mobile app. I'm lovely Saint Amy Joseph. Thank you for joining us. One man is dead following an accident on the Castries Wharf. Stevedore Wilson Joseph suffered a gruesome fate on Thursday afternoon. The details surrounding the incident are still emerging, but one of his fellow stevedores spoke with Hot 7 News.
Why is the container going up? I only hear one of my friends calling, ambulance, ambulance, ambulance. So when I reach on board the ship now, I see my partner on the ground. He didn't die at the right time. He didn't die yet. He was breathing, but the way you see my there's no you will die, you understand? But to say I see, I wasn't sure after I got on board. Yeah.
So where the accident happened on the boat?
On the boat itself, on the boat. Yeah.
Go inside the boat?
And yeah, on top of the boat, yeah. But you load up the container, you understand? So he coming down. I think the container hit the railing of the boat, or he hit something, you know, so he container turn. So he ran very close to the turn. And that's why the container knock him. Yeah. And that's it. When I come, I see him blood. I feel him bad, real bad. Yeah. It could be me, it could be somebody else, but I feel him real bad. But just in the morning we speak together, we spoke together and everything all right. And after a few hours later, he dead. That'll be sad, you know? Yeah, my whole colleague, we work together. For how many years? A lot of years we work together. Yeah.
That was a stevedore employed at the Castries Wharf. As you just heard, another stevedore, Wilson Joseph, died in a freak accident Thursday afternoon. In other news, the country is clearly out of recession and moving in the right direction under the capable stewardship of Prime Minister Alan Shastney. That was the assessment of Ancillary Canneries MP Dominic Fady as he stood to give his support for this year's estimates of revenue and expenditure. Ancillary Canneries MP Dominic Fady stood proudly in the House to support the 2019-2020 estimates of revenue and expenditure. He argued that the island's fiscal position has come a long way under the present administration.
In 2012, the economy declined by 0.3%. Mr. Speaker, so we recorded negative 0.3 growth, which means the economy actually contracted. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, there was a -2% growth. Mr. Speaker, in 2014, it was 0.0. Mr. Speaker, in 2015, it was 0.3. Now, Mr. Speaker, what we have seen is a real return to growth where in the last 2 years, Mr. Speaker, 2017, the growth rate was at 3.3%. In 2018, it was at 1.5. Mr. Speaker, in the last 2 years, this economy has averaged a growth rate of 2.4%, returning, Mr. Speaker, to real, healthy, and consistent growth.
Fady says while some argue that not everyone is feeling the growth in the economy, it takes time for the full effects to be felt.
Mr. Speaker, while some may argue that they're not feeling the growth, Mr. Speaker, it's only a matter of time that they will. And we're not boasting about these figures. All we're saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the country has come out of recession and it is moving in the right direction under the capable hands of this government.
Fede could not resist taking a swipe at the opposition for its management of the country's fiscal situation during its tenure.
What's interesting, Mr. Speaker, is the same people who are experts today and who can write a thesis for you on what we need to do to take the economy forward. They've had 15 years in the last 20, and they couldn't do it themselves. Now they are coming and they're saying that they have the answers to take St. Lucia out of the hole that they themselves have placed it in. Mr. Speaker, we cannot return to the days when there was economic drought. We cannot return, Mr. Speaker, to the days when businesses closed. We cannot return, Mr. Speaker, to the days when people lay employees off in huge numbers, Mr. Speaker, because there was economic contraction.
The opposition, for its part, argues that the policies of the Labour government had more to do with the growth rates of 3.3% in 2016-2017 and that the growth rates of 1.5% for 2018-2019 are attributable to the UWP administration policies having been in office for a full year. Philip J. Pierre described that growth rate as flat. He further stated that the projected growth in the year 2019-2020 is based on an increase in borrowing and an unrealistic expansion in capital expenditure. Massive expenditure with no marked improvements. That is the assessment of the leader of the opposition on the expenditure of the government with respect to St. Jude Hospital, as presented in Parliament on Wednesday. Philip J. Pierre says taxpayers have paid a pretty sum for a dilapidated St. Jude structure and answers are needed. After the Prime Minister tabled the estimates of revenue and expenditure in Parliament, a leader of the opposition, Philip J. Pierre, indicated that they need to be put into context and compared to the estimates of last year. Pierre and the SLP have made no bones about the fact that the state of the island's healthcare is one of the most pressing matters facing the country. He questioned whether the money spent in the last fiscal year, 2018 to 2019, improved the lives of most St. Lucians and whether there are reasons to believe that the planned expenditure for 2019-2020 are realistic and likely to improve the living conditions of St. Lucians. He says on the issue of St. Jude, the facts and figures do not add up.
According to the estimates on page 23, $18 million was spent by the Ministry of Economic Development in the last fiscal year on the George Odlum Stadium. Page 523 of the estimates, of which $15 million was on the building. As we speak, despite the massive expenditure, parts of the stadium still have no roof, and the environment in the stadium shows flies taking over the facility, making it uncomfortable for the health workers. Despite the spending of $15 million, the St. Jude Hospital site or the George Odlum Stadium still remains a construction site.
As far as Pierre is concerned, there is no justification for the sum of $18 million spent on St. Jude.
Who will account for the $18 million of taxpayers' funds that was spent on the George Odlum Stadium, as shown in the estimates, page 523. In spite of this massive expenditure, the health care at the facility has not improved. People continue to die because of a lack of adequate resources.
The opposition leader argued that the monies being wasted still need to be funded either through borrowing or taxes. He says the government has chosen to target minibus drivers to pay up more, never mind the high price of fuel created by the imposition of the $4 excise tax on every gallon of fuel. On page 66 of the estimates, route permit fees are to increase significantly in the year 2019-2020. One parliamentarian is questioning the very nature of St. Lucia's main prison, the Bordelais Correctional Facility. Amidst talks of introduction of an effective parole system, the Castries South MP, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, says a more holistic approach should be taken into consideration to create an atmosphere for rehabilitation. Solange Alfred tells us more.
Recidivism is the reoccurrence of crime among people known to have committed crimes before. Governor General His Excellency Sir Neville Snack, in the throne speech, indicated the government's intention to introduce a parole system. The government is looking to extend a hand to convicted criminals to ensure their successful reintegration into society in hopes of preventing high levels of repeat offences. Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire says that the current conversation regarding a parole system is a decent start. However, according to him, the prison system in St. Lucia is in need of a total overhaul.
The idea of having a parole system and having early release of offenders for good behavior and for other reasons is certainly a welcome issue, because I think there are times when persons would have been rehabilitated by the system, though that's few and far between, and that there should be some consideration of that. But I think we need to put this in a more holistic context. The issue of the Bordelais Correctional facility, should it really be about punishment or should it be about rehabilitation? Because whereas the parole system is an addition and an improvement, maybe we should address the issue in a more holistic sense. How can we transform Bordelais into a truly rehabilitative center? And I think this is a good start, but I think more has to be done.
Dr. Hilaire notes that good behavior of inmates should be rewarded to ensure that those individuals have a fair chance at re-entering society as productive citizens.
I believe inmates should be given an opportunity to rehabilitate, and there should be arrangements for them to have a transition back to the normal society. And of course, those who are rehabilitated, those who show good behavior and good conduct, should be given a chance to re-enter society earlier. So, I mean, one cannot be against such, a proposal.
The MP says that a number of initiatives within the rehabilitative center should work towards ensuring that ex-cons are mentally prepared to return to society.
The two ways, based on experiences in other societies, one is preparing the ex-con to deal with those issues, because part of it is your reaction to people's labeling of you and how you respond to it. You start self-actualization starts to take place, where people are calling you ex-con, they're calling you thief, they're calling you this, they're calling you that, and the frustration builds up and you react to it and you get yourself back into the same challenges. But if you have the psychological services support and other support, people are better prepared to deal with those issues when they go out there, and they can withstand the pressures and not break easily. And secondly, we need to build a more sympathetic society that we have to get people to understand. And for us, we really need in St. Lucia a higher level of tolerance, a higher level of understanding, a higher level of acceptance of persons. And if we have a more sympathetic society, that helps. Also, too, you probably should have designated employment programs to help those people rehabilitate. I mean, we almost have to create it that when they leave prison, those who show they have contrition, those that show they are prepared to change their lives, we have to have the support systems for them, and we have to be able to create some employment for them.
In the same breath, Dr. Hilaire notes that currently the state of unemployment in St. Lucia is a concerning one that gives way to the increase in criminality. He says that ensuring ex-inmates are gainfully employed may not sit well with the unemployed who have not committed any crimes and have a hard time finding jobs. However, according to Dr. Hilaire, some measure of lenience must be given by members of society to the plight of freed ex-convicts. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Solange Alfred.
Efforts to clamp down on the level of criminal activity in the city are bearing fruit. The city police unit is warning would-be robbers that they will face the full brunt of the law. Sergeant of Police attached to the police, that should be the city police unit, Yoni Kamshon, says a robber was recently sentenced after robbing a tourist of a phone.
I'm proud to report that the city constabulary, the matter pertaining to the perpetrator who robbed the tourist of her phone, was convicted yesterday. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison for stealing from person, and he was also fined $500 for having in his possession a dangerous weapon, to wit a knife. I want to make a special appeal to the general public. The tourism sector is part of our economy. The country depends on the tourism industry. I'm making a special appeal to desist from these criminal acts.
That was Sergeant of Police attached to the City Police Unit, Yoni Kamshan. This is the Hot 7 Nightly News. When we come back, the president of the Vendors Association is calling on the CCC to put an end to what he says has been continued disrespect and disregard for the legitimate standing of the organization. A new date has been set for the commencement of work on the Fairmount Hotel project in Choiseul, and the much-anticipated construction of the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road is slated to begin in coming weeks. These stories and more when we return.